Hey everyone, and welcome to my very first video on my cosplay series, Content on a Budget. This is Mini Minaj, and today I'll be showing you guys how I made Princess Hibana's fan from Fire Force with materials I had lying around the house. Sometimes I get ideas for cosplays, but don't always have the money to execute, so here's how I work around that. So first, we're going to have to gather some supplies: cardboard, a box cutter, a ruler and pencil, scissors, a glue gun, and some fabric. So let's get started. First, I cut out 1-inch wide rectangles across the piece of cardboard, trace them out, and then cut them out. Now, do you have to use cardboard? No. If you have anything that's sturdy enough that you can cut out into a rectangular shape, that will work fine. I just used the cardboard because I wanted to make a really long fan. But anything sturdy enough to hold the fabric is perfectly fine. So I cut all of the pieces out. You do not have to do this. This was just to give me a wider range of choices to choose from, because I'm not very good with a box cutter, but I only used 6 out of the stack that I cut out. I poked some holes into the bottom and I threaded some strings into the holes after laying each stick on top of each other. This was actually a lot harder to do on camera, so I did it mostly off camera and came back to show you guys in the end what the end result looked like when I put the strings in. After tying the string together, you should be able to see the shape of the fan when you spread each of the pieces out. Laying the skeleton on the main black fabric, I cut out the shape of the fan. And I did this twice so you could have a side for the back of the fan and for the front of the fan. So taking the red piece of fabric, I placed it on top of the black cutouts I made earlier, and I traced out the same shape just so that when I cut it into strips, I knew it would be the same length across. So I took my ruler out and I measured a few strips off the top for a later part in the process. Definitely use a protractor if you have one. So now it's time to glue down the skeleton to the back piece of the fan. I started off with a glue gun, which turned out to be way too hot for the paper fabric that I was using. So as you will see later in the video, I switched over to a wood glue instead. It dries clear and it does take a bit longer to dry, but it didn't mess with the fabric. Here I am tracing a quarter of a circle out of the bottom of the fan piece. I should have probably did this before I glued it on, but you know, I'm not a professional. So I cut off this piece so that the back of the fan will lay straight onto the skeleton. As you can see, this made it easier for me to glue the rest of the back down and also gave me access to the handle of the fan. Now I'm working on the front of the fan, which as you can see has red stripes going around the front. I cut some slits into the front piece of the fan fabric and I basically just threaded the strips I made earlier from the red fabric through the slits to make a checkered sort of pattern. For this part, it's really simple. You just take the beginning of the ribbon and slide it over and then under, over and then under, and basically repeat until you get to the other side of the fan. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have cut the slits a little closer together so it could kind of look more like the original image, but you know, at the time it was still looking good, so I was like, this is fine. It's only for a few pictures anyway. So now it's time to glue down the top of the fan to the skeleton. As you can see, I took some extra red fabric that I had left over from making the strips and placed it in the middle to add a little extra to the design. Hibana uses her fan and usually it's surrounded by flames, so I thought this would be a really cool effect to show that. After pressing it down to make sure it's secure, I flip the fan around and I fold over the excess fabric and glue it down to the first and last sticks in the skeleton, and I just cut off the excess pieces that kind of overlap. And finally, I am just cleaning everything up, making things a little bit neater, waiting for the glue to dry, basically securing that red piece of fabric in the middle to make sure it doesn't fall out. And basically you are done after that. The glue dries and get ready to take some fire pictures. Ta-da! And here is the finished product in my photos of my cosplay. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned.